Second part of session 77. Let's talk about the veil of forgetting. Fascinating stuff. Let's begin. The veil of forgetting is a topic that we're going to develop a lot and expand in this book 4 of The Law of One, or is a central piece in the study of the archetypical mind. So just like we talked about the choice is related to the veil of forgetting, of course. Everything is completely related here. So everything that you have studied so far is going to play an important role in understanding deeper this design that is the creation. And I wanted to take the opportunity in this video to expand on the veil of forgetting, because we talk about specific parts that are related to it. But again, don't worry, it's going to be a long discussion, and not only within the raw material, but as you continue to study it, because the more you study it, the more it starts to make sense to you. And that's the point. There's one part in this session at the end that Ra emphasizes that there is no particular precise field or point of study or learning. In this case, it's more of a sort of interpretation. How do you see it? It's more poetic. And yes, the philosophical arguments are there to show you that how coherent is your model. So it becomes fun instead of an arduous study, So that's how I would suggest that you approach this. Of course, it's your own personality and how you decide to study the archetypical mind, but that's just my suggestion. It should be fun. It shouldn't be something like, you're beating yourself over the head because you're not getting it. So I tend to do that. So what have we covered so far? We talked about the choice, the Fool's card, right? Or the tarot card of the Fool, and that's called the choice. And we also talked about, or Ra explained a little bit on how the archetypical mind is in the tarot divided into 3 cycles. These cycles are of mind, body, and spirit. Every cycle has 7 archetypes that are complex in themselves, meaning that there's more to it. It's not just one particular archetype. There is a complexity to it. And there is 7. Those 7 within the cycle correspond to the other 2 cycles, meaning that there's a matrix of the mind, and so there is a matrix of the body and a matrix of the spirit. Likewise, a significator for each cycle, and so on. So that's the 21 cards of the tarot, and that's basically it. We also talked about the combinations of study, because it helps to understand, for example, matrix and potentiator. Great combination to study. Then experience and catalyst as well, and so on. So there are different ways you can combine them also, not only within one cycle but with others, and that's where the whole spiel of studying the archetypical mind kind of gets interesting. So we talked about that too. And the conversation went to question 13, where they talked about the relationship. Was that what it is? Don was asking, he wanted to condense the statement. Oh, we talked about the choice, yes. So yeah, no, all of this we kind of covered well. I don't think I have to mention anything. There are relationships betwixt mind, body, and spirit in the same location in octave. I explained that to me it refers to the cycles are octaves. So, and it's funny that the octave of 7 actually starts. I haven't seen a correlation between the densities in the archetypical mind. But it's interesting that we have 0 and 22 or the less. You can actually get the choice at the end of every cycle because it's involved in all of them, right? And it's the beginning and the end. And that's that's what the choice represents to me. It's that manifestation of pure consciousness, which is the beginning and the end. At the beginning of first density and at the end of seventh density. So that's the only relationship that I see here. But that's just me. I don't think I've heard anybody refer to that as, not that I know many people who study the tarot anyways, but the people that I have heard talk about it. In any case, that's what we talked about. So go check last video if you want more details, because I'm going to dive straight into question 14 because we have an amazing question coming up. Not in 14, but later on. It's just, I can make a whole video out of this, and I'll remind you of that. So alright, let's go into question 14. By the way, if you want to skip, there's always timestamps here on YouTube. Sorry, podcast listeners, I don't have that available for you. Question 14, Don says, I am probably having a problem with the concept of time since it appears that the Logos was aware of the polarization choice. It seems that this choice for polarization at the end of third density is an important philosophical plan for the experience past third density. Am I correct in assuming that this process is a process to create the proper or desired experience that will take place in the creation after third density is complete? And Ross says, these philosophical foundations are those of third density. Above this density, there remains the recognition of the architecture of the Logos, but without the veils, which are so integral a part of the process of making the choice in third density. All right. First of all, before I get into this question and answer, I'm going to throw at you a lot of my own view of the creation, my own interpretation, so please bear that in mind, especially when we're talking about the study of the structure of the creation, because I think we should all have our own, not discernment because I'm lying to you or because there is deception or some sort of thing like that, but just because you flower out of these interpretations. You do your own thing and combine it with how you see it. You see, you do your own creation. Let me put it that way. But again, I guess I'm giving you this caveat because I will throw at you a lot of the things that I believe are the way things are. And belief is not reality. It's just a belief. It's just awesome to have beliefs because it's part of the creation. So Don is asking about the consequence or the purpose, right? I'm having a problem with the concept of time since it appears that the Logos was aware of the polarization choice. Another thing is that these conversations are filled with a lot of I don't want to sound critical of Don, but yeah, he didn't know all this stuff. In fact, if anything, I can praise him for having these questions and having the inquisitive mind to go into all of this. But yeah, there's a lot of, for example, the Logos being aware of the polarization choice. There's much to discuss there because the Logos is not really aware of the polarization choice. See, so the question needs a lot of refinement. It seems that this choice for polarization at the end of third density is an important philosophical plan for the experience past third density. That is quite correct, I would say. Am I correct in assuming that this process is a process to create the proper or desired experience that will take place in the creation after third density is complete? So, if anything I can salvage out of this question is the last part. And the reason why I'm saying that I'll salvage is because I know that Ra would have a lot more to say about this, especially in terms of how the choice came to be. And we're going to explore that in this particular part of session 77, the end, because I'm going to cover it completely. So yeah, if anything, is what Ra says on and they'll continue to elaborate on this, how the third density choice makes up basically the experience of fourth, fifth, and sixth density. It's all interrelated, of course. It's not like it's independent. Third density is independent and fourth is equal to all other logos. It's not like that. So Ra says these philosophical foundations, which are the choice and you may even say the mind, body, spirit complex. That's another thing I'll mention in a bit. Above this third density, there remains the recognition of the architecture of the logos. So we are aware, consciousness is aware of the architecture of this particular creation, logos, sun. Let's talk about this sun as a creation. There is awareness, but without the veil, there is no experience of separation. There is no experience of this sensation. There is separation, but there's no veil. There's no illusion. Everything is seen as it is, and there's so much to talk about here, especially when we get into the negative path, because the question arises, well, if there is no veil, how come the negative path continues to go on separation? And of that, I won't cover it because I will extend myself way too long. But there is a reason for that. In any case, that's what Ra is saying. The choice made in third density, in essence, there are above this, yes, they don't say it here. In the future they'll say it, so I'll just mention it here. In the future, meaning now in this session. The choice is important here because it kind of directs or creates the experience of fourth, fifth, and sixth density. That's how it is. That's just the purpose of experience. To experience a third density that elicits a further experience in other densities. That makes sense. And again, I'll bring the microcosmic example of us in the discussion as I'll continue to read this. But my reasoning always to bring the microscopic example, which is us, the human being, as a holistic entity, unique entity, is to always take away from that great cosmic view that we get when we talk about densities and social memory complexes in other galaxies and so on. Yes, that is true, that is important, that is beautiful, but if we go down to ourselves, we can actually experience this. And I'll make some examples of that as we go on. But for now, let's just say that the choice, what we choose here in third density, is what continues to be refined in other densities. Okay, let's move on. Don says in question 15, the specific question that I had was that it seems to me that the choice was planned to create intense polarization past third density, so that experience would be intense past third density. Is this correct? And this is not quite correct, I would say. Ra says, given that our interpretation of your sound vibration complexes is appropriate, this is incorrect. The intensity of fourth density is that of the refining of the rough-hewn sculpture. This is indeed, in its own way, quite intense, causing the mind-body-spirit complex to move ever inward and onward in its quest for fuller expression. However, in third density, the statue is forged in the fire. This is the type of intensity which is not the property of fourth, fifth, sixth, or seventh densities. My God. This discussion, because it's so compact with everything that we have discussed so far, is so rich that, again, I can spend half hour just talking about this answer. But I won't and I can't. So, Don's question, which is, it's a really good question actually, I would say, and it's well formulated, is that the purpose of third density is to increase the intensity of experience or catalyst, right? Is that what he said? No, experience would be intense past the third density. So I get from his question that he thinks that from this choice, then the experience intensifies. This is not the case, at least not from Ra's interpretation of, because you see, let me put it this way. Let's just imagine there are no densities. There's only third density, right? From this choice, right? Yes, the experience of fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh density are going to be determined by this choice. That is true. And so you can say that the intensity that is brought in third density for this choice is truly what sets the rest of the experience all the way back to the creator, to infinity. But you see, the intensity of experience, and I think this is why Ra says, in essence, if we understand your words right, this is incorrect. Because it's not that the intensity, it gets more intense in fourth, fifth, and sixth density. Actually, it gets a little bit more softer, let's say. The intensity is here in third density. Why? Because of catalyst. Catalyst is 100 times more than any other density, or at least compared to fourth density, which is next. It could probably be even more intense than fifth and sixth. Definitely must be, because catalyst, I think there is still catalyst in fourth density, if I remember correctly, and is in the beginning stages, and it's not so much, I think it has to do more with the rest of polarization that is needed. Basically, you getting used to the sense of unity that fourth density is, love and understanding, which is just the beginning of the cycle. So no, the experience is not intensified that much because of the choice later on, although it is determined, the experience in fourth, fifth, and so on, all of the densities, the experience is determined by third density, which is characterized by the choice. But the intensity is not the same. The highest intensity is here. And the beauty of it too, you see, let me put another thing that this is the way I see the creation, so this is why I gave you the caveat that I will be throwing this into you, is that to me, the purpose of the creation is not evolution. Yes, evolution is necessary. In fact, evolution is inevitable. That's how I say it. The reason why I say this is because I find a lot of people who are stuck in evolution. Oh, I gotta evolve. All these things that I'm doing is because I need to evolve. And with that, you're bypassing the real reason for the creation. What was the reason? And this is philosophically in the law of one, and it's also in non-duality. The purpose of creation is to have an experience. You see, imagination is not for the purpose of you returning to yourself after you have done fantasizing your imagination with your castles and your princesses and all this stuff, right? So what's the purpose of experience? Of course, imagination is for experience. Don't take the creation more complicated than imagination. It's the imagination of consciousness. It's that simple. Consciousness is infinitely capable of imagining things, and it does so. And it does it in such a believable way that here we are thinking that we are humans and that we're separate and that we have matter and that we have planets and all this stuff. That's what we're enjoying. So my point is, remember, the point of creation is experience. Evolution is inevitable. Now, we want to complicate this evolution. Evolution should not be dull. Evolution should not be easy. Just like a play or a movie should not be so straightforward. It should always appeal to that sense of mystery and what's going to happen next, and oh my god, I want to know more. You see, that's how movies have evolved over time. Just like we have evolved, and we'll talk about this in terms of complicating this creation so we can have a better experience. So keep that in mind because it's going to be helpful throughout the rest of the session. All right. So Ross says the intensity of force density is that of the refining of the rough-hewn sculpture. So that's the intensity, is saying, my God, look at the choice that I made. Let me refine this. See? This is indeed in its own way quite intense, causing the mind-body-spirit complex to move ever inward and onward in its quest for fuller expression. Right. It is definitely intense compared to where, for example, where Ra is. For them, this is not so intense. Actually, the opposite. It's really intense. For them, the work that they do is not so intense. So they see fourth density still pretty intense. However, in third density, the statue is forged in the fire. So yes, you can see the intensity. There's a different intensity in terms of energy that is needed to forge the statue or hew the statue, right? So, I think there was another point. Oh yes, I wanted to relate this to ourselves. You see, when we make a choice, we go to the heart of our choice, and I'm talking about the human experience here. We make a choice, whatever, that be at work, family, relationship. You make a choice, and then you work with that choice. You see, to make that choice, there's a lot of catalysts involved to make that choice. And then working with that choice is still intense, but you see, if you work from the heart, of course. If you're still working with catalyst, then you know how intense that is. But when you work with the heart, it's kind of like more relief, if you will. You see, when working from the heart is more like giving compassion to the choice, giving compassion to yourself, and all of this. So you can relate to this, how smaller, still intense, but it's smaller than when you had to make the choice. You know how intense that was. So related to that, because we wouldn't be a microscopic hologram of the creation if we didn't have these in our own experiences. So please keep that in mind. It's not something that you only do in fourth density. You're doing an analog here in third density from your energy centers, if we can use those terms to be related to. So this is a type of intensity which is not the property of fourth, fifth, sixth, or seventh densities. The forging of the statue here in the fire. I love the poetic part. But all right, let's move on. Let's go to question 16, where Don says, what I am really attempting to understand, since all of these 21 philosophical bases result in the 22nd, which is the choice. This is why this choice is so important. Why the Logos, it seems, puts so much emphasis on this choice and what function that choice of polarity is precisely in the evolution or the experience of that which is created by the Logos. Ross says the polarization or choosing of each mind, body, spirit is necessary for harvestability from third density. The higher densities do their work due to the polarity gain in this choice. So you see, now it's expanded a little bit more. I know that there's way more to the question that Don is giving here. Now it's interesting that I see that I can expand a lot more on what Don says here, and Ra chooses to give a very precise answer. So I'm going to try to cover those two. My expansion on Don's question and Ra's. So let me start with mine. Don is trying to understand why we have this archetypical mind, which is 21 archetypes, and then culminating in the choice, the 22nd. And he says this, he wants to know why this choice is so important. Why would the Logos put so much emphasis on this choice? And what function that choice of polarity is precisely in the evolution of experience, or the experience of that which is created by Logos. So many things here. Why would the Logos design a choice, and why would the choice be important for the evolution of experience of what the Logos created, or the Sun? again, let's simplify it and think about the logos as one portion of imagination of the creator. Okay? So you know already the whole diagram of galaxies and suns and stars being the same thing, by the way. Every single logos has their own archetypes, ways of experience, and all of this. Now, let us substitute all of that with, there is one big consciousness that imagines all of this. Okay? Even the word big is too small. There is infinite consciousness which imagines particular creations or fantasies. Right? These are the logos, or the logoi. Now, each has their own way of experiencing its imagination. Different fantasies. Each logos may be termed a fantasy, I would say. You see, I'm simplifying things, of course. We can get into the nitty-gritty of 7 densities and, if there is veil, if there is no veil, and all of that. But why would we do that? Let's just put it into imagination. So if we do that with imagination, then we have the logos wanting to have an experience. Why would it want a choice? Because if you have no choice, how fun is that? I mean, I'm sure it is fun. It's still an experience where you just go through, let me experience this as what I am. Right? Let me put it this way. If you were imagining that you are a character and you're doing this and you're doing that, you're safe because you have no choice, or what they will get into, free will. This is a very contentious word in this interpretation, so I'll get mine. When they talk about free will and logos or logoi having no free will prior to the veiling. And yes, in your imagination you can see that. But if you can introduce an element in which you get lost in your imagination and you would have to make a choice, now that would be quite the experience, because now you're lost in your own imagination. Now, you're always safe because you know that whatever happens, I can just return to myself. But you won't know that. You'll get into that imagination and you'll get lost in that experience, in the history and the people and all the things that are happening. And lo and behold, you're here on planet Earth. That's what's happening, you see. That's what the logos designed as this particular logos. Other logoi have done their own experiments as well with veil, I'm sure. But this particular one's, or this one, that's what it did. So we're here, right? So that's what I would say. That's the emphasis that it put on the choice. And Ra explains that the purpose of the choice, they say, the polarization or choosing of each mind, body, spirit. I don't know if it should be complex or not, but I think it should have been complex. Is necessary for higher stability from third density. Maybe it's not necessary. The higher densities do their work due to the polarity gain in this choice. So Ra is just saying that the choice is basically for polarization, and that polarization is the basis of the next densities, the higher densities. So 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. So that's it. You see, that's what Ra says. One thing that I have a sort of issue here is that I'm not sure. You will see that sometimes Ra leaves out the word complex out of mind, body, spirit. Sometimes they do it on purpose because they're referring to a prior to the veil experience, and that has no complexity in the mind, body, spirit, or no complex. Or they will say, oops, we forgot, and Don would say, did you mean mind, body, spirit complex? And they would say, oh yes, just like with the numbers in the past. This is all due to pain flares and all that stuff that Carla was having. So yeah, use your discernment here, but this is not such a big thing. Here we're talking about polarization or choosing, which to me, again, is after the veil. So it should be complex, but it's just a minor correction that I would have, if anything. So mind, body, spirit, whether it's complex or not, it doesn't matter. It would need this for higher stability from third density. So that's it. That's the reason why Ra gives for the logos to be making this choice, or creating this choice, is a very important part of its own experience. Question 17, Don says, now would it be possible for this work of our density to be performed if all of the sub-logoi chose the same polarity in any particular expression or evolution of a logos? Let us make the assumption that our sun created nothing but, through the first distortion, there was no product except positive polarity. Would work then be done in fourth density and higher as a function only of this positive polarization evolving from our original creation of sub-logoi? Interesting, complicated question. Ra says, elements of this query illustrate the reason I was unable to answer your previous question without knowledge of the logos involved. To turn to your question, there were logoi which chose to set the plan for the activation of mind-body-spirit complexes through each true color body without recourse to the prior application of free will. It is, to our knowledge, only in the absence of free will that the conditions of which you speak obtain. In such a procession of densities, you find an extraordinarily long, as you measure time, third density, likewise fourth density. Yeah, let me try to explain this. Wow, this is interesting. Is this my... Yes, this is going to be... Buckle up. That's all I can say. This is going to be an interesting trip. Oh, fascinating one. So, Don is, in essence, asking if... he's actually assuming, pretty good assumption that... Let me read the first part again. Would it be possible for this work of our density to be performed? This work, what we're doing in third density, right? If the sub-logoi chose the same polarity in any particular expression or evolution of a logos. I'm not sure what he meant by that. Chose the same polarity in any particular expression or evolution. So only positive polarity available, I guess, is what he wanted to ask, right? Would it be possible for this work of our density to be performed if all of the sub-logoi chose the same polarity in any particular expression or evolution of a logos? Let us make the assumption that our sun created nothing but, through the first distortion, there was no product except positive polarity. Right, yes, so in that case, only positive polarity existed. Well, first of all, key distinction here. There is no such thing as only positive polarity, just like there is no inside only and no outside. You see, we have a dilemma here, a philosophical dilemma. There is no only positive polarity. So I need to make this distinction before we go on. Yeah, because Don is saying, would work then be done in fourth density and higher as a function only of this positive polarization evolving from our original creation of sub-logoi? Okay, so let me get the thorn out of my toe and say there is no such thing as only positive polarity. You need to have negative polarity to have work. This existed always and forever. The creation is made out of two. It's dual, right? It has polarity. But what Don is referring to here is the service to others and the service to self polarity, something that Ra explains that actually was created after the veiling. So service to self polarity was created after the veiling. I'm pretty sure of what I'm saying. I could be wrong, but this is what I remember, and I'll go with that. There wasn't a negative polarization in the past. Why? Because everybody knew what they were. No veil, everybody knows what they are. And that's what Ra explains here, that it was very long to harvest yourself to fourth density. It makes sense, and I'll explain why. So Again, that's Don's question. If there was only positive polarity, but in this case, I'm going to take it as positive polarity in the sense of service to others. In the absence of the veil, there is no possibility of service to self, hence everybody is in service to others. We shouldn't even call it service to others, it's just the status quo of the creation. So it's very boring, you see? I hope you're beginning to savor the flavor of negativity. And I'm talking about service to self. It's completely necessary. Okay, so Ra first says, well, it is for this reason that in the past we ask you which logos are we talking about, right? And then they say, to turn to your question, there were logoi, which chose to set the plan for the activation of mind, body, spirit complexes through each true color body without recourse to the prior application of free will. Again, I'm not sure if that was supposed to be complex. So I have my issue there. Maybe. Because if they were complex, then they had a veil and they had, of course, the possibility of negative polarity. So I'm not sure there. It is, to our knowledge, only in an absence of free will that the conditions of which you speak obtain. Now, what is this absence of free will? This is a contentious point that I mentioned in the past. Not in the past, but just a couple of minutes ago. This free will comes after the veiling. Ra has said in the past that this logos has a desire for free will, meaning that it gets lost in its own creation. I mean, here I am talking as if I was a person, but I am actually the sun talking to you. And you are the sun listening to yourself. How fun is that? So you see, this sun has a penchant for free will. It loves free will. And it enjoys that, given it to its sub-logoi, which is us, planet Earth. So it's a beautiful model. It really is. So it's only in the absence of free will that the conditions that we speak, that Don speaks, is actually true. When there is no, what should I call it? When there is, there's no independent feeling of being an individual, right? In such a procession of densities, you find an extraordinarily long, as you measure time, third density. So it takes a long time, a very long time. All right, so let me continue reading. I'm going to make a pause here because there's a lot of wind outside, and electricity here where I live sometimes is a little flaky. So I don't want to lose this video just because of that. So let me move on, and you will only see a seamless transition here. Ra continues and says, then as the entities begin to see the creator, there is a very rapid, as you measure time, procession towards the 8th density. This is due to the fact that one who knows not, cares not. Let us illustrate by observing the relative harmony and unchanging quality of existence in one of your, as you call it, primitive tribes. The entities have the concepts of lawful and taboo, but the law is inexorable and all events occur as predestined. There is no concept of right and wrong, good or bad. It is a culture in monochrome. We're gonna get into some amazing stuff in a bit. By the way, if you're a creator of content and you want a little tip, you can record videos if you use OBS in Flash, or I think that's what it is, FLV instead of MP4. And if your OBS crashes or electricity, like in my case, may go out, you can salvage the recording so far. So little tip there if you're a producer of content. Back to the law of one. Ra says that, continues and says that, yes, in such a logos where there is no veil and there is no, only the positive polarity of ethical polarity, we're saying, of only service to others. There is only what we call service to others. They wouldn't call it service to others, but just service, natural service. And this is due to the fact that one who knows not cares not. See? So if you don't know anything about the possibility of, say, I don't know, helping other people, you're only helping yourself. Yeah, you don't care. It's all good. It's all good. Whatever happens to you, it's whatever happens to you. It's okay because I am you and you are me, and it's all well. So that's why it takes so long, so very long. Now they give the illustration of the relative harmony and unchanging quality of one of our primitive tribes, where the concepts of lawful and taboo exist, but the law is inexorable, and all events occur as predestined. That's what was meant to happen, and we understand it, and that's okay. So there is no concept of right and wrong. There is no polarization there, good or bad. So it will eventually, of course, evolve into unity, but it will take a long time. The experience is not intensified. The experience is just very diluted, you see. It is a culture in monochrome. Sounds sad. It's supposed to be sad. Compared to this is fun. But you have to understand the creation to know that it's fun. Now, you may think, Gabe, at this point, I don't know, man, you're just a crazy guy talking about law of one, philosophy. What do we know? How do we know if this is true? Well, look at the, I'm just going to call Buddhist or any other society that has been working with this knowledge for a long time. How do they look? Well, they look happy. They look okay. They understand the suffering of ignorant humans, but they don't use the word ignorant, and I like to emphasize this. Ignorant as we use it pejoratively here in the West. No, ignorance is just, oh, you don't know. Okay, I'm here to teach you if you want, and if you don't, then that's great. That's fine. We appreciate you. So, in fact, Buddhists look at people lost in Maya as, wow. They admire people who are lost in Maya because they admire the creation. You see, they don't have this thirst for, at least that's not the idea. I'm sure some Buddhists have the idea of going to the next incarnation, closer to the Buddhahood, and all of that, which is nonsense. Trust me, not everything is perfect. But it's the closest thing we have to societies living under the understanding that all is well, all is one. At least those who live it that way, in that philosophy, you can tell that what they see is that, yes, it is true, there is polarity, there is all of this, but in the end, it's all one, it's all good. And, we can see the concept of right and wrong and good or bad as something beneficial. It's not something like, oh my God, why are we so suffering here? And why did the logos design all of this? You are the sun complaining about your own creation. That's what's happening. But you have to be in ignorance to do that. So be aware of the creation. Be aware that this necessity for polarity is what makes up the intensity of your experience. If you didn't have this, it would be dull. It wouldn't be fun. Okay? And it is fun. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. Ra says, in this context, you may see the one you call Lucifer as the true light bringer, in that the knowledge of good and evil both precipitated the mind-body spirits of this logos from the Edenic conditions of constant contentment, but also provided the impetus to move, to work, and to learn. Beautiful, beautiful. By the way, key distinction, and also a word of caution as a student of the Law of One, or any other philosophy for that matter. Stick with the concepts that you know. or if you find incongruency with the concepts, then you have to create your own. You have to make up your own, especially in your mind. You don't have to, unless you teach it, there is no need for you to come up with new terms, but to understand inherently. Don't confuse the terms. Why? Because we're talking about Lucifer. Very big word here. Even within some people who study metaphysics, they use Lucifer as a sort of state of mind, which is kind of appropriate too, I guess. And this is why, again, I wanted to expand your knowledge and not so much the words, but what they mean. But they use Lucifer as a state of mind in which you are very spiritual. You're always talking about spirituality, or you're interested in that. It's not even you or a person. It's a tendency of the mind to be more into that, and you get very spiritual and you kind of neglect the material world. You see, whereas Satan is supposed to be the material, neglecting the spiritual, and then there is a middle ground, which I forget what it is. But in this context, we're not talking about that Lucifer. We're talking about Lucifer as the symbolic bringer of light. Now, why would Lucifer bring light? Because, and we have demonized Lucifer, the symbol, I mean, as something evil. It's evil. Yes, darkness can be seen as something that is shading the light, right? But is darkness really evil? Not in the context of experience. In the context of experience, if you only had light, there would be no experience. There would be no form, no nothing. So you need darkness, and you appreciate the darkness for that. Now this brings, of course, a possibility of polarization, as you are aware, because the consciousness, the logos, would have certain preference for the darkness, and others would have preference for the light. Here we are, positive and negative polarities. So this is why Ra says, in this context, you may see the one you call Lucifer as the true light bringer. Why? Because it brings light, knowledge, form, gives the ability to have experiences. No form, no experience. And that the knowledge of good and evil both precipitated the mind-body spirits, in this case it's fine to say mind-body spirits because they weren't complex, of this logos from the Edenic conditions. Is that how it's pronounced? Edenic? The Garden of Eden. Of constant contentment, but also provided the impetus to move, to work, and to learn. See, more intense experience. So that's what Lucifer is supposed to symbolize. It's supposed to bring the capacity for duality, to experience duality in this way. You see? So again, it can get complicated with the symbols and the terms and all of that, but in this, just think about it as Lucifer, light bringer, is what brings knowledge of good and evil, and it precipitates the mind-body spirits of this logos from the Edenic conditions of, everything's well, everything's fine because we see each other and everything perfect. No, it brings it to that possibility, to the possibility of having to move, to work, and to learn. Yes, makes sense. Let's move on. Finally, Ra says, those logoi whose creations have been set up without free will have not, in the feeling of those logoi, given the Creator the quality and variety of experience of itself, as have those logoi which have incorporated free will as paramount. Thusly, you find those logoi moving through the timeless states at what you would see as a later space-time to choose the free will character when elucidating the foundations of each logos. That last part is really deep. But yeah, Ra is finalizing this saying that those stars, those logoi, that haven't implemented free will, and again I repeat, my interpretation of this is that you have to be lost in your own imagination to have free will. Otherwise, you don't have free will. Let me put it this way. You imagine you're a character. That character has no free will. It's your own free will that is imagining the character. So it won't be that much of an experience. Still is experience, you're getting lost in your own creation there, but not lost, you're navigating it with the character. You are the character, and you know you are the character. But if you give free will to your character, that's what Ra's talking about here. And that's what we have. We. See, I can call myself an I. It's just me. I can just call myself me. And guess what? I can exacerbate the sensation of me as the separate self and become a sort of fourth density, fifth density negative being. That's possible. Great. So, given the creator the quality and variety of experience, see, they feel, the logoi that do not give free will, they feel that they don't give the creator a quality and variety of experience of itself as having those logoi which have incorporated free will as paramount. So compare a logoi which has just imagined itself as creatures of some kind, and it doesn't provide free will, loss, or it doesn't get lost in its creation. Then it doesn't feel that it gives the big creator the experience, except compared to those, right, of itself as have compared to the other ones that have incorporated free will. This makes sense. This makes total sense, and I don't want to keep beating a dead horse here, but I hope you get the point. Thusly, you find those logoi moving through the timeless states at what you would see as a later space-time to choose the free will character. So I'm not sure how to interpret this, because I don't know if Ra is referring to you can see those logoi that don't have free will in their sub-logoi moving through the timeless states at a very slow pace in space-time until they actually decide to implement free will. I don't know. I'm not sure what they meant there. But I'm sure that I want to move on to the next question. Don says, I guess under the first distortion, it was the free will of the logos to choose to evolve without free will. Is this correct? Ra says, this is correct. Don says, do the logoi that choose this type of evolution choose both the service to self and the service to others path for different logoi? Or do they choose just one of the paths? Yeah, that doesn't happen. Ra says, those, what you would call early logoi, which chose lack of free will foundations, to all extent, with no exceptions, founded logoi of the service to others path. The, shall we say, saga of polarity, its consequences and limits were unimagined until experience. Right. So I think that's what's happening in that last phrase. Let me go back where they say, thusly you find those logoi moving through the timeless states at what you would see as a later space-time to choose the free will character when elucidating the foundations of each logos. Yeah, I'm not completely sure, but I think it has to do with what we just read. That there are logoi which are still in third density. They're stuck in third density. And planet Earth is moving really fast, and other planets, they're moving really fast, so they're waiting basically to put, I think I may be really completely off here, but that's just how I see it. Those logoi which are still they may be, I don't know, I don't want to give a wrong impression. That's just how I see it. In any case, what I do know is that Don asked also, what was his question? Under the first distortion, is the free will of the logos to choose to evolve without free will? Yeah, of course. It's the creator choosing how to experience reality, right? So out of its own free will, it decided that it would choose without free will. without further free will. You see, this is where it gets confusing for some people, because the first distortion is free will. So how can you be under the first distortion of free will and have no free will? So we're talking about the big free will that is always present, and it was the free will of this first distortion to evolve mind, body, spirits without free will. So yes, in your imagination, without getting lost and believing that you are the character, like really believing, and then suddenly you're coming back and you say, wow, I completely forgot that I was imagining that. That's awesome. You see, that would be great. And so yeah, Ra says this is correct. But then Don says, and the logoi chose this type of evolution. They also chose both the service to self and the service to others path for different logoi. Or did they choose one of the paths? Well, Ra says that what we would call early logoi, which chose lack of free will foundations. It's important that, let me show you here in the slide. There is, I think this is Jim, who, by the way, they did a tremendous job to do the syntaxes here on Ra's words. But see, lack of free will foundations. Lack of free will foundations is the design of the creation, of that particular creation, I mean. So it is those that, to all extents with no exceptions, founded logoi of the service to others path. Yeah, so all of them decided to have a service to others path, which again, I wouldn't call it service to others, but from our point of view is service to others. I think from their point of view it's just service to the one, through the obvious experience that we're all connected and we're all one. You see, so that those are the ones that chose this and are sort of living it. I'm not sure if they're still living it in, I suppose they are, because nothing is ever done, you know, it continues to live in eternity. But I don't want to sound obscure. Then they say, the saga of polarity, its consequences and limits were unimagined until experience, right? Until we experience this experiment, this laboratory of veiling conditions. Fascinating. All right, fascinating is question 20 as well. Don says, in other words, you're saying that originally the logoi that did not choose this free will path did not choose it simply because they had not conceived of it. They had not conceived of it, yes. And later logoi, extending the first distortion farther down through their evolution, experience it as an outcropping or growth from that extension of the first distortion. Am I correct in saying that? Ra says, yes. So let me explain that fast. Actually, let me finish. There's like 3 questions here. Don says in question 21, then did this particular logos that we experience plan for this polarity and know all about it prior to its plan? That, I suspect, is what happened. Ra says this is quite correct. Then Don says, in that case, you would have, as a logos, you would have the advantage of selecting the form of acceleration, I might say, of spiritual evolution by planning for what we call the major archetypical philosophical foundation, and planning these as a function of the polarity that would be gained in third density. Is this correct? And Ra says, this is exquisitely correct. So to browse through the questions again. Don saying, in other words, the original logoi did not choose this free will. So yeah, this is all in the study of the archetypical mind as well. We know that those, bear this in mind, those logoi, those experiences, those fantasies, those imaginations of the galaxy that imagine creation, imagine experience, they did not conceive, they had no free will for its iterations, its holographic projections of itself, or sub-logoi. then those simply because they had not conceived of it. Yes, in their imagination, they had not conceived it. So it's relatively new, this whole idea of being lost in creation the way we do. This is a relative new experience. How cool is that, to know that this experience is relatively new in the imagination of the creator? You can see that the creator is infinitely evolving. Oh, it's just so massive and amazing. It's not like, oh, the creator is eventually going to run out of ideas. No, it has infinite ideas. And this is one of them. But it's the refinement of everything. Everything that it has created. You see, here I can invoke even the knowledge that the octaves of experience are infinite. You see, every octave of creation synthesizes new learnings, new understandings to apply to the next octave. And so when Ra talks about the next octave, I kind of get the idea that there is already, because they talk about guardians being from the next octave, helping this octave. So to me, that is the surface of the creator, which has synthesized everything already and is kind of saying, oh, let me help evolve all of this experiment that I still have. So from this highest knowledge that I have of myself, my God, I don't know how I can how can I even project this to you? It's amazing. It's just amazing. It's unbelievable. We're in a creation like this, right? But it only takes, it's not wishful thinking even, because I know that this can happen and say, that's just wishful thinking, you know. Maybe this creation is not like that after all. No, because we're playing with the infinity of consciousness, the infinity of possibilities. Why not? Why not this be what's happening? And it makes sense to me, at least. So yeah, the earlier logoi did not plan on this because they had not conceived it. And later logoi extending the first distortion farther down their evolution experience it as an outcropping or growth from that extension of the first distortion. So the logoi basically said, hey, if I have free will, then I can design an experience in which I give free will to my own characters. Lo and behold, here we are. So yes, that is true. Then Don says, then did this particular logos that we experience plan for this polarity and know all about it prior to its plan? That I suspect, yes, of course it knew all of it before. This is important. I have heard at some point that, I mean, it is an interpretation. I have nothing against it. Actually, I do have something against it. Let me not be polite. I have something against it, which is this. The logos knew about this polarity and knew all about it prior to its plan. What was its plan? Laying down the foundation of third density. That's the archetypical mind. What I have heard is that, which I think is just a wrong interpretation, is that in third density here on planet Earth, there was a time where there was no veil. That makes no sense. Third density is within the veil, and it always has. Even within the raw material, we know that it is from the beginning. You see, when we had the beginning of the major cycle, we had this. Yes, I think this was in the earlier sessions. They talked about this, on how we were very bellicose. Our bellicose nature comes from the veiling, of course. So no, there was always a veil here in third density, as far as I understand it. And yes, the sun knew about this. Then finally, the last question I covered was, in that case, you would have, as a logos, you would have the advantage of selecting the form of acceleration, I might say, with spiritual evolution, laying down. So basically, yes, you as a logos, having all the resources available, can plan according to what you have. And remember, each logos plans according to the total knowledge that they have up until that point. Which, if you want to explode the top of your head right now, think that all galaxies are connected. All the infinite possible galaxies. It's almost like saying, if I have this thought, would my mind recognize after thinking this thought? Yes, it's the same mind thinking all of this. So it evolves simultaneously. So it's not like, oh, look, this galaxy is doing it. We have to wait for the speed of light to get here for us to realize it. It's one consciousness, and it's evolving completely simultaneous. So, my God, I know, this is deep metaphysics and all of that, but it's just beautiful. All right, that is exquisitely correct, Ross says. Even their word is just like, yes, that's beautiful. All right, with that in mind, I move to the next question, which is question 23. In that case, it seems that a thorough knowledge of the precise nature of these philosophical foundations would be of primary importance to the study of the evolution of mind, body, and spirit. And I would like to carefully go through each of the basic 21, starting with the mind, if this is agreeable with Ra. Ra says, this is agreeable with two requests, which must be made. Firstly, that an attempt be made to state the student's grasp of each archetype. We may then comment, we cannot teach learn to the extent of learn teaching. Secondly, we request that it be constantly kept before the mind as the candle before the eye, that each mind-body-spirit complex shall and should, and indeed must, perceive each archetype, if you must use this convenient term, in its own way. Therefore, you may see that precision is not the goal, rather quality of general concept complex perception is the goal. Wow. My God, what an answer here. So in essence, Don is saying, in that case, I want to know everything about this 21 archetypes, right? I want to know everything about the evolution of mind, body, and spirit in this particular, because Don at this point said, wait a minute, we're dealing here with the structure of this particular sun. Now remember, Don is scientific, very mechanical, so he's thinking, if we learn this, then, we can move on to deeper knowledge. That part of Don's wish was right. If we move into this archetypical mind and we study it, then we get into deeper knowledge. Yes. And so the part that Ra is kind of polishing here is saying, yes, we will study this with you, but two warnings or two requests, not a warning, but you can call it a warning too. First, that an attempt be made to state the student's grasp of each archetype. We will comment, but we're not going to learn from you, or learn for you, rather. So the first agreement is that you make the comments and you make the observations, we make the comments. Okay? I love this. This is a master. This is a teacher guiding you and asking you questions so you can navigate your own experience. This is what I do. This is why I love doing what I do, because I'm passionate about this. I don't do it with the archetypical mind, by the way. I do it with the recognition of who you are, self-realization, which I'm starting a campaign, if that's even possible. I want to make it viral. Enlightenment is not exotic. Enlightenment is not something that should be reserved for a few or something. What I do make the distinction is that enlightenment is a process. Enlightenment is not a one thing. However, what we call enlightenment happens in an instant. That's what Ra calls enlightenment, happens in the moment. But I will say that what we perceive as somebody enlightened is somebody who has been applying this knowledge throughout his or her life. So anyhow, I digress. So all right, that's Ra's way of teaching, and I agree. We should always allow the person to make the observations and we comment on it. We ask questions. That's how we teach. Even if you're teaching, language or whatever it is, just make the person think. Now, secondly, they say we request that it be constantly kept before the mind, as the candle before the eye, that each mind-body-spirit complex shall, should, and indeed must perceive each archetype. in its own way. Very important. You cannot say, oh no, this is what this represents, right? This would be, and nobody does this, of course. There is a tendency to be like that sometimes, yes. But no, if anything, right? First, we're allowing, right? That's what Ra's saying. You may see that precision is not the goal. It's not to say, well, this is the archetype and this is how it should be seen. Look at what they say. Quality of general concept complex perception is the goal. Concept complex perception. Oh my God. The quality of a general concept complex perception is the goal. So the quality of a general concept of these complex perceptions, that's what we're looking for. So in essence, interpretation, how you see it. Now, if you know about the archetypical mind and if you want to teach it, then what you should do is to allow the person to evolve through its perception, whatever it is that it sees. And if you see that they're making a mistake, and hey, if I'm making a mistake, and you see it, then yeah, show the incongruency there. Show how that makes no sense. You see? But make them see it. Don't just say it. So that's what Ra is saying in essence. I mean, they're saying it to Don because they're going to study it with Don, but I'm mentioning it in general. Well, let's move on. I'm about to finish this session and we're good on time. Question 24, Don says, now, there are several general concepts that I would like to be sure that we have clear before going into this process, and I will certainly adhere to the requests that you have just stated. When our logos designed this particular evolution of experience, it decided to use the system of which we spoke, creating or allowing for polarization through total free will. How is this different from the logos that does not do this? I see the logos creating the possibility of increase in vibration through the densities. Let me ask first, how are the densities provided for and set up by the logos, if you can answer this? And they won't answer completely, because they say, this shall be the last full query of this working. The psychic attack upon this instrument has, shall we say, left scars which must be tended, in our own opinion, in order to maintain the instrument. Let us observe your second density. Many come more rapidly to third density than others, not because of an innate efficiency of catalyst, but because of unusual opportunities for investment. In just such a way, those of fourth density may invest third density. Those of fifth density may invest fourth. When fifth density has been obtained, the process takes upon itself a momentum based upon the characteristics of wisdom when applied to circumstance. The logos itself then, in these instances, provides investment opportunities, if you wish to use that term. May we inquire if there are any brief queries at this space time? It's a very deep answer here. It doesn't totally cover what Don was asking, I believe. So let me browse through Don's question again, give my opinions if I have any, and then finish this up. There are several general concepts that I would like to be sure that we have. Okay. When our logos designed this particular evolution of experience, it decided to use the system of which we spoke, creating or allowing for polarization through free will. Yes, so yeah, this is fine. The logos decided all of this, and I don't know if this phone is causing interference. All right, sorry. It decided to use the system of which we spoke, creating or allowing polarization through free will. Okay, yes, we're all good there. And Don says, how is this different from the logos that does not do this? So deciding the free will, right? I see logos creating the possibility of increase in vibration through the densities. So I think Ra only... Didn't they say that they were going to answer? That was your second density. No, that's different. Okay. So yeah, Don asked a couple of questions. How is this different from the logos that does not do this, that allows free will to its mind, body, spirit complexes? And again, I just want to repeat, it's not like the logos is assigning us free will. We are the logos. We are the sun. So we are the sun lost in experience. Why do I say this? Because, I don't know, in the back of my mind, there's always somebody thinking, yeah, Gabe, but why would the sun do this to us? We're no different than the sun, is what I'm trying to say. Nor are we different from the galaxy and the creator and so on, but that's a deeper dive. So, how is this different from the logos that does not give free will to itself in the mind, body, spirit complexes? I see the logos creating the possibility of increase in vibration through the densities. Right? Yes. Let me ask first, how are the densities provided for and set up by the logos? So I think Ra only answers this, because I know they could have answered, how is this different from the logos that does not do this? And they didn't. They didn't ask the difference. They didn't answer the difference between the logos that does not give free will to mind, body, spirit, and the one that does, like ours. And so they say, okay, so they give us a sort of example, very simple, with second density. You know that these second density who find unusual opportunities for investment are pets, basically, because, let me read it and then reread it, and you get what I mean. Let us observe your second density. Many come more rapidly to third density than others, not because of an innate efficiency of catalysts, but because of unusual opportunities for investment. What they're saying here is that let us observe your animals, basically, and plants, who move up to third density. Why do they do it? Not because they have an innate efficiency of use of catalyst, but because they find unusual opportunities of investment. That is, us humans, who invest them with love, with self-awareness. They start realizing, hey, I exist because when I do this, this happens to me, and this person responds to me. You know, this is what, you can see it beautifully, metaphysically, as we humans are channeling the spirit into the pets while we do this. How do you do that? Give them love, give them attention. Love is all we can give, but to be more precise, give attention to them, play with them, teach them words, and just everything that we do with pets. That's what causes the channeling of the spirit into self-awareness, basically. That's what it is. So that type of investment happens in other densities as well. So fourth density is also investing love in us. Third density and fifth density. Now think about this not as separate entities, but as one mind, the logos doing all of this. This is how the logos provides, right? That's what Don's question was. How are the densities provided for and set up by the logos? Well, this is how it is. The densities are provided and set up for each density to invest in the other. Fifth density, Ra says, when fifth density has been obtained, the process takes upon itself a momentum based upon the characteristics of wisdom when applied to circumstance. This is the work of fifth density. And I think this is the key why Ra says that social memory complex is not necessary in fifth density, positive or negative, because it takes upon itself a momentum based on the characteristics of wisdom. The logos itself then, in these instances, in fifth density, provides investment opportunities, if you wish to use that term. So the logos now itself provides through wisdom. I don't know how that works. That's interesting. I would love to know more about this, but I don't think they go into any detail in the future. They might, and I just don't remember. But that's it. That's how the evolution through the densities happen. And that's all I got today. Finally, session 77 is done. Conclusions. Woo! Yeah, the only thing that comes to me in practical sense is one. I'm all about recognizing in the self. Listen, let me put it this way. Let me be blunt. If it's true that the universe is a mirror of who I am, then I can go deep into myself and realize what the universe is. And so in the study of the law of one, metaphysics in general, I personally cannot tolerate a sort of conclusion or determination that there are things that are outside of me. No, what is apparently outside of me is something that I haven't seen within myself. Or that, yes, what appears separate from me is something that I haven't reconciled in myself. So, in the same way, when I study the law of one, I automatically make these connections. Otherwise, they don't make sense to me. And what is that? Well, we talked about the experience of third density, how it has been intensified by this free will that we have. We are creatures of free will, meaning that, yes, we all have an independent view of ourselves. That gives us the possibility of exacerbating the separate self into the negative polarity, or returning to the service to others, which is just the state in which these beings were in the past or prior to the veiling, in other logoi, where there was just that, we're all one, everything's connected. Of course, it's not the same to do it within the veil than outside of the veil, and that's why it's so intense. But faith and will are your tools. If you don't have faith that this is how it is, then you have to go deeper into yourself. And your will is what determines that depth of how far you want to go, and can go, of course, at specific moments in your life. So, why am I saying all of this? Because this goes into the heart of trusting the universe. Can I get away with that? Trust in the universe. You read that in Instagram or whatever your social media preferences or inspirational nexus is. Trust the universe. Believe. Not even believe, know. Go deeper into yourself to actually self-realize the knowing that everything is fine, everything is okay. Because we are lost. Yes, we are lost purposely. Because we are the logos. We're experiencing this. And it's fun, like I said. If anything, one of the things that I would say about humanity right now is that we're taking things so serious. Why? Why is the question? I mean, out of respect, I understand that some people like to talk about serious things. But in my heart, I'm laughing. I'm laughing not in a derisive way, I'm mocking them. But my heart is laughing. My heart is always smiling at that. That's because I know that I know. And again, that doesn't mean that I don't feel pain, that I don't feel sadness. All of these things are human. You must be human. You cannot not be human. See? I love the story of, what's the difference between a stone Buddha and a human Buddha? Well, you hit one in the head and it sounds tuk. And you hit the other one in the head and it sounds ouch. Humans, we still feel. So, it's fine to have all of this, but your heart knows that nothing is serious, that all of this is just actually, yes, it's the beauty of creation, and you should enjoy it. You should enjoy your emotions. You wouldn't have them if you didn't have this veil. It's alright, I can talk about this for a while, but I don't mean to. This is where I give you my reminder that if you're interested in getting into this path of self-realization, which is what I recommend everybody because is what set me free from my last frustration, problems, and questions that I had, especially within my own field of study, being a scientist and getting into spirituality. It was kind of like a different thing, completely different. I just couldn't grasp it until I found this. The direct path is, oh my God, it's the most beautiful thing I can ever share, and probably will ever share. So that's it. You know where to find me. Description below. You'll see what I mean. We can talk. We can design this program together so we can find you your way to the path of liberation. All right, that's it. That's my whole plug here. I'm getting better at it. Next session, 78, I believe it's a long one, so it'll probably be 3 parts, but it's worth it. You know it's worth it. What's worth it is having you here as always. Thank you for listening. I want to give a big shout out to all the people that listen to me in podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, and so on. Let me give you a little last bit of information about that. I never knew that this would be popular or people would find it on Spotify and all the other platforms. I did it because one person made a request that I should do it, and I did it. I said, okay, I don't even know the person. One of you guys, well, actually it was in Spanish, who decided. So thank that person in Spanish person. Otherwise I would not have done it. I would just left it here on YouTube. So big shout out to all of you Spotify listeners. I think it's the biggest platform where this is streamed. And yeah, come to YouTube to see my face, see other people's comments, leave your comments, say hello, and that's it. That's all I got. All right, big shout out to now everybody. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in session 78.